Sensational!
Hello and welcome to Soccer Today, and that was just for Mikey.
I didn't know why you had to throw it in there. So unnecessary.
Oh, it's all about narratives, right? It's very necessary, in fact. Even though your boys did bounce back, of course, midweek and did very, very well. Sarah Pereira, Albert Vatanian, I'm James Sharman. Yes, so many narratives in the football world entering another weekend of Premier League action. Let's get right to it, shall we, with the aforementioned Manchester United. Yes, a big game for them because every game is a big game for United these days. Up against Southampton from Old Trafford. That's Sunday, 10 a.m. Eastern. Third place right now for United, 49 points. The Saints way down in 19th and 21 points. Let's hear now from the Red Devils manager, Erik ten Hag.
From minute one, we're behind the team. And I think the team gave energy by the performance, and then they gave it back. So once again, there's a great bond between team and fans, and we are pleased with it.
Okay, Mikey, so he's talking about the Real Betis win, a really good win, great bounce-back performance, actually. But the billion-dollar question is this game, in fact, a must-win game for Manchester United? I know mathematically it's not. You know my feelings on calling these must-win games. But given what happened last weekend, given they're playing Southampton, of all teams, they have to win this one, don't they?
They should come out and put in an inspiring performance, but is it must win? No, I think that term gets tossed around a little bit too much. They come out, they draw, they dominate Southampton. Okay, it's not the result you would have wanted yet. Manchester United are still in a top four race. I want to say race, but they're very much solidified their spot in the top four. So yeah, I think they did their job on Thursday against Betis, putting in one of their best performances of the season in front of an Old Trafford crowd that really got behind them.
And Ten Hag, he went with the same 11 as well, which I think was pretty smart, giving those guys a chance to redeem themselves, including Bruno Fernandes, who listen, why are you laughing?
Under fire.
You know why I'm laughing.
Let's hear about Bruno Fernandes.
Is he a leader? I mean, listen, we know he's a great player. Should he have that armband? A lot of conjecture right now in the English press and amongst the fans that this is not the right guy to have the armband, while Harry Maguire's not a very good footballer.
Yeah, but why? Why don't they want to have the armband?
Well, the behaviour from last
the
week.
whinging and putting his arms in
Right.
the air and getting
overly
upset.
emotional.
Yeah, he is overly emotional, and he's been like that forever since he was at Sporting Udinese. That's just the player who he is. But you can't deny the fact that he's an incredible footballer and what he does to his team. One of the main reasons why Manchester United are in this position is not only because of Marcus Rashford, but because of him as well. He leads by example. I mean, that other stuff, nobody likes it. And if you're the captain of Manchester United, you're especially not liked for doing that because everyone goes back to, well, Roy Keane wouldn't have done that, right?
He would have just broken someone's leg.
But that's the shadow Bruno Fernandes is under. I think for me, just let his playing do the talking. Forget about everything else.
So why give him the armband then? Let him play. Let him do what he does best.
Well, he must be a great leader in that locker room.
We don't know what happens in the locker room, but
Right.
there is some sort of sense that you want your captain on the pitch to have some composure. You want them to be the kind of level-headed ones that always pulls, the younger guys out of the little fights that get out on the pitch. You don't want it to be that person who's whining and complaining up and down the pitch, and that's supposed to be your captain.
Yeah, he does that when they're winning as well, by the way. This is
No,
not
for
just
sure.
losing. I mean, everything is magnified when you lose 7-0 to Liverpool. And I'm not just saying that, but it's the truth. That it is the biggest rivalry in English football.
No, it is for sure. I mean, listen, speaking of being overly emotional, are you able to put aside your fandom and look at this objectively and say that he is the right guy for that job?
100% unequivocally, yes, absolutely. Bruno Fernandes is the right guy to be Manchester United's captain. From the outside looking in, I get it. I get why people look at him and are like, oh, he's just complaining, he's just whining. But Bruno Fernandes plays with so much passion. He genuinely cares. Even when Manchester United were going through their hard times and it looked like there was so much apathy out on the pitch, the one person who consistently cared was Bruno Fernandes. He covers more ground than any other player in the Premier League, any other player in top 5 leagues. He does it all for Manchester United. And there's a reason why the loudest ovation ahead of kickoff against Betis on Thursday was for Bruno Fernandes, because the fans who are at Old Trafford week in, week out, understand what Bruno Fernandes means to Manchester United.
5 goals, 6 assists in the Premier League. Pretty
Yeah,
good.
no, listen, no one's questioning how good he is. He's one of the best players in European football. It's just, does he deserve that armband. And listen, we'll find out, I suppose. Albert, you have some suggestions where we should lay our money for this?
So I was thinking initially I'm just going to go and try and hammer Manchester United, but there's really no value there. I like both teams to score. I know it's kind of strange considering Southampton aren't really known for their scoring, but at Old Trafford over the last 5 games, all competitions, both teams to scores have hit. And I think Southampton are in a position where they don't want to come away with nothing. It'll be difficult. So if they go down early, they're going to press. And I also think they have James Ward-Prowse from the dead ball. If they get into a good position, as we saw against Chelsea, James Ward-Prowse can make teams pay. So for him to score plus 550, which I like, but the bet is both teams to score at even money.
Yep, he's been brilliant. He really has. Just don't give him penalties because we sort of missed that last week. He's better off from outside the box.
No Letizia, huh?
No Letizia, no, that's for sure. Yeah, but I mean, listen, Southampton under the new manager Sellers are playing, I guess, somewhat better football at the moment, Sarah. But for me, they're a good bet to go down. And that's nothing new. That's nothing too shocking. I know that. But I don't see much with that club right now. It's a young team trying to find their way. But I don't see themselves digging themselves out of this hole.
Yeah, and I think it's been like that for several weeks now. You know, we've all kind of realized that Southampton are going to be one of the teams that go down. I don't think that's any news. If they can get a draw here, I mean, I think that'd be a fantastic result for them. But I'm struggling to see that happen.
Yeah, well, we'll find out. I mean, listen, these are big games at this point in the season. There's no dead rubbers. There's no, dark days of football seasons. This is big potential for both teams. Top 4 football at stake, of course, and relegation.
United have only won 3 of their last 9 against Southampton. There you go.
All right.
Bogey club.
Absolutely. When we come back, we'll look at the leaders, the guys above United, Arsenal. What a season so far. Can they maintain it against Fulham? Yeah, what a match last weekend. Arsenal at the death. 97th minute, Reece Nelson, of course, with the win against Bournemouth. Since then, they drew Sporting Lisbon in the Europa League 2-2 midweek. But the Gunners still in first place, way up on Fulham in 7th, who have been just a great story so far this season as well. Before we get to the billion-dollar question, though, let's hear from Mikel Arteta, who saw the good and the bad against Sporting from his team.
We are conceding too many simple goals, and we talked about the importance of boxes, and especially in competition when you are in or out. And today we didn't defend that well enough, and we have to be better at threatening the opponents as well. But obviously you have an opponent there, and we have had a lot of games recently, really emotional games recently. And today we make a lot of changes, and that cohesion sometimes needs some time, and you could feel that in the first 10-15 minutes that he needed some time to adapt and to click. But if we don't expose them, that's never going to happen.
Yeah, he did rotate, of course, midweek. He speaks well, doesn't he? And a lot of reports this week across the European media about where his future lies. Ancelotti's leaving Real Madrid, so therefore, vis-a-vis, in comes Arteta, right? Where does his future lie next season? Surely it's still at Arsenal, Sarah.
Yeah, I would think so. They've done fantastic. You know, coming in his first senior position, he's at Arsenal. Last season wasn't great, but it takes some time to obviously adjust. And now he's really made this team absolutely fantastic with really young guys as well. And he's given them so much confidence. I don't think he's going anywhere next season.
I mean, listen, the club is backing him. He seems like a very strategic guy. I don't see him leaving. And even if they're probably going to win this year, but even if they don't win, it's a great starting point to what the future lies ahead for Arsenal. The club is backing Arteta. They trust his project. And now he has a team that can win that's also very young. This isn't an old team. This is one of the youngest teams in the Premier League.
The youngest.
It'd be, yeah, there you go. It's the youngest team in the Premier League. Why would you leave that? But, I mean, when a team, let's just say, like Real Madrid come calling, it's hard to say no.
Yeah, it seems you're smirking there, Mike.
Well, I just find it hilarious that a year ago or a year and a half ago, we were all Mikel Arteta out. Now we're talking about him becoming potentially the next manager of Real Madrid.
It's crazy,
hilarious.
isn't it? That's how football works, though,
Football
right? How
rumors,
sports works.
yeah.
And I mean, but like Albert kind of mentioned there, it's a valid point. He's committed so much to this team. He's been through that. You know, he's seen the dark side. He's had the misery. And he's come out of it. He's built this young team. They're about to do some pretty special things. Even if it's not this year, this team's going to be top 4 for a long time. Can be for trophies, I think. Why would he leave what he's built?
You're right. Is there a manager whose stock has risen more this year than Mikel Arteta's?
or maybe the opponent, Marcus Silva, but
Yeah.
not the
There you go.
obviously not.
I mean, yeah,
I
you
mean,
throw
Erik
Thomas
Ten Hag
Frank
is
and
doing a real
Eddie
good
Howe,
job
Ten
at
Hag.
But
United.
Ten Hag
Yeah.
came in with high
He
pedigree,
did,
though.
yeah.
That's fair.
Considering where he was a year ago, like you said, on the
Serbi?
cusp of being
Yeah.
fired.
Like maybe Spalletti.
Yeah, I would say Arteta's probably number one at the top of
Right?
this. And I think there's
That'd be
something
good.
to be said about trust. When you're a manager and your board trusts you, which you don't really get anywhere else, you got to build that up. You got to stick with that club.
Now, I mentioned, of course, the game last week. It was crazy, winning at the end. They are picking up wins again, Arsenal, after a little bit of a dip there. But you could look at it as a way of, at the same time, that they're being pushed by some pretty average teams as well. They're not quite firing on all cylinders right now. Do you think there's any concern about Arsenal at the moment and their current form?
Yeah, there's definitely a fragility in that defense, which has been so good. But for some reason, it's the goals that they concede aren't very good goals. I mean, it's not because of the quality of players. It's just like a lapse of concentration. Like, you can't be giving up a goal, was it 9 seconds into a Premier League game against a Bournemouth side that never really scores goals? Like, that just can't happen. I'm not too concerned about it, but going up against a team like Fulham who can score goals, and there's a reason why they're in the top 7, I think it definitely is cause for concern, but I think they have more than enough in attack to make up for whatever issues they have defensively.
Had Fulham won on Monday, lost to Brentford. They've been fifth place. Fifth place in the Premier League. This is a promotion club. No one's talking about them. Why?
I think there's so many stories this season in the Prem. Like, every weekend, it's craziness. And I think because there's so much football being played, maybe they're one of the ones that have kind of gotten swept under the rug with, no shame to Fulham. Like you said, they've been doing fantastic, but I think they might just be one of those storylines because, the big six are constantly in the news. And then you have other teams like Brentford or Leeds and Wolves who have fallen to the bottom. And so it's based on maybe what's a bigger story. But no, Fulham have been fantastic this season.
I think they would have been a bigger story had it been for that game against Brentford if they could have found a way to pick up the win. Because I feel like coming out of this week, and maybe I'm just being a little biased here, but I feel like a lot of people are talking about Brentford in the story of Brentford. Whereas if Fulham were to win that game, I think a lot more people would be talking about Fulham. It seems like they're getting to this point where they're almost convincing people that they're European contenders, but they haven't quite got over that hump.
Well, I mean, it's a great story. Marcus Silva, it's a great story too, right? He got fired by Watford in 2019, took a couple of years off, just, take a breath. I'm sure took some courses, saw some other teams, how they coach, comes back and does this job. You have a bet for this one.
I do. And speaking of Fulham, I'm going to give Fulham some love here. So I'm going to take Fulham draw no bet.
Wow.
Or sorry, Fulham double chance is actually my bet at plus 140. So Fulham to either win or tie this game. The reason being, Arsenal, Thursday, they just traveled to Portugal, right? That travel does factor in. But beyond that, this Arsenal team doesn't have necessarily the players to rotate their squad in a way I think they would want to rotate their squad. Obviously, they're getting Jesus probably back for this weekend, which is a huge boost. But you still have Eddie Nketiah out. You have Trossard that's going to be out. They just can't rotate their squad in the way that I think they want to. And if you think back, they're arguably one of their worst performances of the season was against Leeds a day after, 2 days after they traveled again in Europa League. So I think this one's setting up for maybe a Fulham result.
Craven Cottage also is one of the great grounds of English football, and they're a good home team, of course. Let's move on now to Selhurst Park. Speaking of great grounds, not quite the same. as
No.
Craven Cottage, but I used to always pass it on the way to London, where I used to live, and you see the stadium there from the train tracks. Halcyon days, halcyon days. Crystal Palace against Man City, of course. City still in second place overall. This one goes on Saturday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Have City been disappointed? That is the question we'll debate after we hear from the manager, Pep Guardiola.
Premier League, every game away is difficult, at home as well. But whose part always have been? Yeah, definitely. Crystal Palace always in the previous season, especially at home. We struggle a lot to get results.
All right, so let me just clarify this, right? They're in second place. They're still in contention for a championship right now. Champions League, last 16, looking pretty good there. Playing Leipzig, it's 1-1, second leg next week. In the FA Cup quarter-finals, has it been disappointing?
No, absolutely not. Everyone wants to point towards Man City not being at the top of the Premier League and maybe not be at the top of their game. And they're not. They're not top of the game, but they're still good enough. They're still in all those competitions. This game is very interesting, though, because it seems we're talking about bogey clubs. Like for Manchester United, could be Southampton. For Man City, it's Crystal Palace.
Weirdly.
Right? I think the last 3 games, they've only won once, Man City against Crystal Palace. And you would think it'd be more than that, just pure domination. But that's not the case. For whatever reason, Palace like to play City. And is there ever a right time to play Manchester City? No, but I think this season it's probably easier than it has been in the past.
Their last win for Palace came back on December 31st.
Yeah, I was going to say
against
Palace are
Bournemouth.
drawing like no other. I
Winners
think
of 2023.
it's miserable. They're just kind of sitting mid-table, just closer to the bottom actually, and just not conceding, not score, just not really doing. That's exactly.
They're matting.
Yeah.
But you
No
see,
better
you
word.
see these matches, right, where you have a mid-table side or a bottom of the league table side step up for a game like this, and you get the best of the best. It could be for one game, and then next week they'll lose to Bournemouth or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, never discount Palace.
Quickly, where should we put the money?
Yeah, this one was also tricky because I have to still back City. You know, they're chasing Arsenal. They can't drop any points, and it doesn't matter if it's on the road or not. No value, of course. So we're gonna back Phil Foden, who's been very hot lately. 4 goals in the last 3 matches. He's gonna start. I mean, I think why not put your money there? I think it's plus 260 for him to score any time. He's been
in
absolutely
form.
fantastic, and I mean, confidence is there. When players are usually hot, they stay hot for a little bit. So I think it's going to keep going.
He's been on great form, showing I think England once again what he can do. I wonder if Gareth Southgate's watching because
Yeah.
doesn't always pick in the
He
start
died out for a
games.
bit after the World Cup.
A lot of players
Yeah.
did. Yeah, Jack Grealish playing pretty well too.
Grealish,
last week.
Mahrez. It's like everybody besides like Holland and Julian Alvarez, like those 2 that you're expecting to score. Everyone else getting on the board, so why not?
Yeah, I mean Haaland just at 27 so far.
Oh,
Didn't
yeah,
score
yeah.
last week, so he's in a terrible slump right now.
I think it's also it's really big that they're playing before Arsenal, so they can put the pressure on them, or
Yeah.
conversely, that gap could widen.
Good point. All right, so time for a break. When we come back, though, we have Leicester, Chelsea, Spurs, Nottingham Forest, and Newcastle against Wolves.
Well, you just have to do the maths. Only 11 can play, and we've got more than 11. So inevitably, they're not going to be happy. There's no point denying that. That's not to say they haven't been really professional, really supportive of the team. And there's always injuries. There's always things that happen. You know, you look at the situation with Marc Cucurella, for example, wasn't in the squad, and then came in against Dortmund and was fantastic and played a really good game and contributed to us winning. So I think the players know that they just have to be ready. That's how football works. Just have to be ready and keep fighting. Make sure when your chance comes, you're in a good position to play.
It's a tough job, right? Managing a squad of 47 players or whatever it is at Chelsea right now, but he's finding a way right now. They are playing better at Chelsea. Up against Leicester at the King Power this Saturday. Okay, I know this time last week we thought he's getting fired, right? Anytime. But he gets a big win in the Champions League midweek, Dortmund. Back-to-back wins now. Has Graham Potter found the balance to his team?
That's too early to say. Has he found? I think he needs to go out and prove it this week, and then I think he needs to go out and prove it next week. This Chelsea team, with the amount of talent that they have, should be competing and winning almost every week that they play. So let's see it.
But it takes time, right, to
It
build
does.
chemistry, especially with all these players. I think he has found the balance. I mean, I was talking about, we did a Champions League hit the other day, and I really thought that Fofana, Koulibaly, and Cucurella as a back three were fantastic. Fofana, kind of the forgotten man when he came over from Leicester, right? He was really good at Leicester, had that unfortunate injury. He's been out for a while, but he comes back, fills in for Thiago Silva, and he's been fantastic. At least in that Dortmund game, he was great. And in the midfield, you have Kovacic and Fernandes. 2 players who are going to work hard box to box and have the quality for the final ball. Then you got healthy again, your wingbacks, Reece James, Ben Chilwell.
Although he's out this weekend, Reece James again.
That's
Illness,
right.
not
Yes, that's
injury.
right. But getting those wing backs back, it's so crucial to the system that he plays. And up front, I think they have the quality in Sterling, Havertz, and João Felix. It's just finding the back of the net. I think the balance is there. They just need someone to score the goals.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I'm still with Mikey though here. I don't feel like they're fully set in stone. Like going into this match against Leicester, I could see Leicester picking up a point or maybe even 3 easily. There's something still where it does take time, and I'm not sure if it's gonna continue. And they're also still in the Champions League, right? So that's gonna be difficult for them to manage as well.
I will say, though, about Graham Potter, he knows himself. He's benching a £100 million man in Udrich
Yeah,
right now.
bold.
That takes some guts, right? I mean, I'm sure Todd Bowley is thinking, what are you doing? I spent this much on this guy. And listen, I think Mudryk will be a big success in the Premier League. I'm not concerned about him. But, a weaker manager would be playing these stars to just, make his owner feel better. He's not doing that. Let's move on now, shall we? Spurs against Nottingham Forest. A little laugh there from Albert. Poor old Albert. We know he's a big Spurs fan, right? Huge Spurs fan. It's been a rough week. Crashed out of the Champions League during the week, of course. Antonio Conte, he's back on the sidelines. I'm not sure if they're any better for it, of course. And they're playing a pretty decent and tenacious Nottingham Forest side. Now, Antonio Conte has been criticised all week. He's blaming his team, though. Just listen.
I, and not with us, it means that you are thinking only to yourself, that you are selfish. And for this reason, and I utilize this situation and to repeat to my players that if you want to build something important, if you want to try to fight for something important, if you want to try to be competitive, to win a trophy, you have to speak with we, not with I.
All right, Albert, the floor is yours. You're shaking your head
Well,
there.
what's the question?
When Spurs signed him last year, you were very happy.
Absolutely,
Every Spurs
yeah.
fan was. He's led them to a top 4 battle right now. Champions League knockout round.
Well, he led them to the top 4 last season, right? They were
Yeah.
great. Let's not forget, coming into this season, how many people were talking about, oh, maybe Spurs can finish top spot in the Premier League.
Yeah.
That was really talked about.
Were you?
No, I wasn't sold on it. I'm a Spurs fan. I'm going to be completely honest with you. But how can you not be happy when you bring in a manager like Antonio Conte and with his resume, right? It just hasn't worked out. And listen to what he's saying. It gets so old. How long we've been hearing this? It's nonstop since the beginning. And, he's throwing players on the bus. He's essentially throwing the management under the bus. He's throwing Levy under the bus. I don't know. I don't know what to make of this.
Does he run the risk of becoming the most despised Spurs manager?
No, there's tons of them. Mourinho's one of them. Like, it just the list
So
goes on and on.
Who's worse, Mourinho or Conte?
It's not about who's worse. It just never works out at Tottenham. And I think one of the reasons is because if you bring in a manager like Mourinho, if you bring in a manager like Antonio Conte, they can only win a certain way, and that's being backed with tons of funds. He's been backed up until this point, where most Spurs managers haven't been backed the way he has.
Well, he was backed,
and it's still not working.
Richarlison was his target.
Yes.
He brings in Richarlison
Yeah.
for 60 million,
Yeah.
and he's not playing him. And even after the match midweek, Richarlison's comments are pretty scathing, saying, my season's been, right?
Yeah.
And he blames the manager. I'm not playing enough. I was injured. I'm healthy again
Right.
now. So at the same time, he has been given money and some new toys, but he's not taking those toys out of the box.
Yeah, Richarlison's a weird one. He did so well with Brazil in the World Cup, but he hasn't really done much with Spurs, but he also really hasn't been given the opportunity. He's on the bench all the time. And I mean, at least play him and figure out whether or not it's going to work with him or without him. But clearly this locker room is right now in pieces. It seems like the players are pissed, the coach is pissed, management is obviously going to be pissed. It's not a good time to
I mean, what bothers me is that Conte takes no blame for his tactics and what he does. I mean, how do you get bounced from the FA Cup by Sheffield United? And that's no disrespect to the Blades. They're a great team, but Spurs should be beating a team like that. Why is Harry Kane on the bench? It's so important for the side to win a trophy. You can't do that. And then you have midweek in Milan. You would think maybe Milan was the team that needed to win that game, not Spurs. It was so disappointing. And it's not just Conte, it's the players as well. We talked about it before. Harry Kane hasn't had his big European moment.
No, he hasn't.
He doesn't score in big games. Like he has for England, but for Spurs he hasn't. So it's not just Conte. It's a combination of everything. But Conte is at the top of the list in terms of bringing down that toxic energy into the locker room.
Can we go back to Richarlison for a little bit?
I thought you might do that.
No, just it's such a tough position that he's been put in for Tottenham, because any striker going to Tottenham is going to be in a really tough position, because you're not displacing Harry Kane from the lineup. You have to find a way to fit in around Harry Kane. Whereas Richarlison, we see him go to a team like Brazil who do everything and then get him the ball into the right spaces, and he's able to finish off. That's the way that Richarlison's at his best. With Spurs, he's being asked to play on the wing. He's being asked to drop deeper.
But he was
and
never
do a
that
lot
number
more.
9 at Everton. That was Dominic Calvert-Lewin.
Yeah, but
Richarlison played out wide.
Yeah,
so
but the
that's not
team
an
was
issue.
built around Richarlison at that point for Everton, at least going forward. So I feel like the opportunity here with Richarlison, it's just not the right fit. And they're spending almost the same amount of money as Arsenal's spending, yet still they're not getting the results.
But when you call out your manager publicly, it doesn't end well usually. One of them's leaving, and I don't think it's the player.
Yeah.
I think it's Conte at this
Yeah,
point.
I think so
And
too.
Poch is still sitting there waiting for
He's
a
just
job at some
waiting.
point.
Yeah,
He's just
100%.
waiting.
Tuchel has been mentioned as well. You know, that was a kind of a weird, murky situation at
Yeah.
Chelsea, why he left. Actually, he's got his wife's got a tell-all book coming out.
Oh, boy.
Where apparently she's going to suggest why he left, which is for off-the-field reasons. He's trying to stop that from happening in court right now. Oh, I love football. All the drama, right? It's just
It'll be
fantastic.
Pochettino, by the way.
But
Yeah, I think so.
you think so?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Back to the FA Cup, the Blades, right? They win that game. They're then playing Blackburn.
Yeah,
in
it's a
the
great tie.
quarterfinals. You're getting close to
Yeah.
a final.
Yeah.
And Spurs fans would prefer a trophy than a top 4 finish, I think, at this point. They're craving success and a trophy and that day. And I think a manager that doesn't understand perhaps the club and the fan base
No, exactly.
rest players
Yeah.
in a big game, right?
Yeah, and what's the point of getting to the Champions League if you're going to put up performances like
Well,
that?
precisely, yeah. Oh, Spurs fans. Every year it seems something, right? All right, you got a bet for this one, Albert?
On this one, oh yes, Nottingham Forest plus 1.5, which is crazy to think. I mean, based on their form, the United game, the Milan game in midweek, what's going on off the pitch, I just don't see them winning this game. And if they do, maybe it's 1-0. And I like Forest to cover the 1.5 spread.
Okay, sounds good. Next up, Newcastle up against Wolves. Wolves getting some results of late, against the form book perhaps, but doing a pretty good job. Newcastle slipping and sliding somewhat. Down at 6th in the table right now on 41 points. Still a really good season. Which brings the question of how safe is Eddie Howe? I know it sounds crazy.
Yeah,
It's
this
crazy.
is like absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah?
Oh!
Whoa, okay, well, let's start with you, Sarah, shall we? Okay, no, I understand why it's ridiculous, but the fact of the matter is, you've got the richest owners in second richest owners in world football right now, seeing their team in the top 4 and making this big jump, and then they start slipping and sliding a little bit despite investing in the
Slipping
squad.
and sliding into 6th place. I mean,
I
get
know.
out of town. I think it would be foolish if they sacked him. I mean, I guess we see how PSG works, so maybe it's money speaks. But
So what's this like rating? Like what out of 10? How safe should he feel? 10 being you ain't going anywhere.
8.
Yeah.
I'd say so.
So
Yeah.
there's a chance, you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, there's always a chance in football.
It's not that bad a question.
You're saying there's a chance.
I don't know. I think like if they finish even still top 10, that's successful for them because they've barely dug into all that money they have. They haven't really done anything super unreasonable yet, super irresponsible. This summer maybe, but I mean right now they've been a great team this season, and I don't think Eddie Howe should be going anywhere.
I thought the question was crazy too until you just reminded me of the fact of how much money Newcastle do have, and when you have the likes of maybe a Pochettino and a Thomas Tuchel out there.
Oh, yeah.
And you're going to spend even more money in the summer and then
Ancelotti.
spend more money in the next window, maybe his job isn't as safe as we think.
Ah.
Yeah, I mean, I have a bet for this game, but I'll tell you why it's not.
I would take Eddie Howe at Spurs, by the way. Just throwing that out there.
It's not as
Eddie Howe
high
at
as
that
I think you
point.
guys think. Newcastle have only won one game since 2023, one league match.
Wow.
And that game was a 1-0 victory against Fulham. And if you remember in that game, Fulham missed the last-minute penalty for that game. So their form has dropped, and it's an old adage in football is like, when you start really great and you fade off, it leaves a sour taste in people's mouths, and you start to feel like it's a wasted season. But if you start slowly and finish strong, fans are really excited. So right now, Newcastle's doing the former, which is why, maybe there is a little bit of pressure on Eddie Howe here to get things right. And actually, weirdly enough in this game, this is probably one of the craziest stats, and this is my bet, I'm going for a 1-1 draw in this game. The last 15 times that these two teams have played, 9 of those games have finished 1-1.
All right.
It's a wild stat.
What's that thing?
Crazy.
That's at like plus 600.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I like that.
It's a weird stat.
Yeah, it is a weird stat. Another draw. Another draw for Newcastle. That's the last thing they need right now. And Eddie Howe might get fired by this time next week. And then we'll revisit this question, won't we? All right, when we come back, much more to get to. We've got Leeds, Brighton, Everton, Brentford, and West Ham, Aston Villa. Claret and Blue versus Claret and Blue. Welcome back to Soccer Today. From Ellen Road, Leeds against Brighton. Brighton, I mean, for me, they are the story of the season so far in many regards. Sitting in 8th place right now, 38 points. But they've got 3 games in hand on most teams, right? 3 games in hand on Spurs, for example, who are in 4th place. So this is crazy. And I never thought I'd be saying this season. But is Brighton potentially a top 4 club? Are you a believer in Brighton being a top 4 club?
Top 4, not quite. Am I a believer in them being a European club? Absolutely. I think the way that this team's playing it's inspiring, to be completely honest. It's so refreshing watching this Brighton team play, and story after story, you see players emerge. Obviously, the latest one is Matoma and how much people are talking about him. But also, I love the move to re-sign Caicedo and lock him up to a long-term contract, because that was the controversy, that dark cloud that sort of was hovering over this club, and they've locked that up and hopefully put that in the rear view at least until the summer now, where they can revisit that. Also, the way that De Zerbi's got this squad in form. I got to compliment them a lot, but the way that top four is shaping out with Liverpool now making a push, it's tough.
Yeah. It's going to be difficult for Brighton. I mean, but one thing that they're doing, what other top four or good top four clubs do, is they win games that they're supposed to win. I mean, in the West Ham game, probably not expecting them to demolish them the way that they did 4-0.
Yeah.
But that's what top four teams do. And at home to Liverpool, they beat them 3-0. At home to Bournemouth, they beat Bournemouth 1-0. So it's pretty impressive to see how they're not only winning games, but just the style of which they're going about it. They're not eking these wins away. They're demolishing teams.
Away from home, 22 goals in the season, third best in the league. They love to attack away from home. Up against Leeds, though. Leeds, more and more each week goes by, I'm thinking they could be going down.
I'd love
they're
to
being
see
really
it.
sucked into that
Send a
vacuum
big
right
team.
now.
Wow,
Brighton.
you'd love to see Leeds go down?
I want to see a big team go down. Now, whether that's Leeds, Wolves.
Why would you want to see
Everton.
a big team like Leeds go down, who are out of the Premier League for so
I'm
many
with
years?
you. I like that.
I
too.
could think of a couple reasons.
I'd like a big team to go down.
Canine rivalry there.
Yeah, no,
What's the hatred for Leeds for? Just in general?
just then bother Mikey about it all the time and his little
Oh, that's the reason.
2-man in the middle.
That's the
No,
reason. This little rivalry here.
Yeah, it is.
yeah, maybe just no. But even if Wolves, I just want controversy at this point. Like,
Okay.
make it interesting. But no, they one win in their last 10. Leeds are also another team like Palace, not winning, but definitely losing, but also lots of draws, but not putting anything in the back of the net. They are struggling to score. They are one of the worst goal differentials in the Prem, and I don't think they're gonna stand much of a chance here against Brighton, honestly.
Leeds are in a horrible position. I mean, when you're deep in a relegation battle, similar to Everton, and you bring in a new manager, that's really hard to do. Now you got to learn this manager's new philosophy, and you got to get the team going immediately. There's no time. There's no time to figure it out. You got to do it right away. And under Javi Gracia, it's not working right
But
now.
what about the new manager bump?
It doesn't exist.
Oh, come
It
on.
actually doesn't
that
exist. It's
exists.
been proven it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
When it happens, it stands out, right? But
yeah.
it doesn't often happen.
It does. Well, think about Leeds. You mentioned one win in the last 10 games. That one win came, 2 games ago, right? They could be a team. I think they have enough talent to make a run here. We'll see. I don't know.
They
We'll see
haven't
what
scored
happens.
in 5 of the past 7 goals,
Nice.
7 games. And Patrick Bamford's out again today. So, yeah, there's issues there. It's too bad. I want to see the big clubs in the Premier League. I want to see Forest. I want to see
Give some of
Leeds,
the little
teams that I
clubs
watched
a
growing up.
chance.
So that's the reason. There's certain clubs I just couldn't care less about being in the Premier League.
West Brom?
That's a great example.
QPR.
Yeah. QPR,
Burnley?
Crystal Palace.
The new Burnley coming up.
The new Burnley are fun to watch under Vincent Company.
Not bad.
Playing champagne football.
Yeah.
Just watch out. Everton up against Brentford. Speaking of teams very much in a relegation battle right now, the toughest season just goes worse to worse. I mean, listen, they show more steel under Sean Dyche, I think, but overall, there's a lot of issues there. Up against a Brentford team who we did a deep dive, actually. You check out our YouTube channel and Homestand Sports earlier this week. They're a fascinating team. Is Brentford the new Everton? It's $1 billion question. In that, for years, Everton was always just outside the European spots or thereabouts, number 6 in the league. Never better, never worse. Could this be Brentford, do you think, moving forward? And they'll be, I'm sure, happy with that.
Yeah, I mean, Thomas Frank and Brentford have been fantastic, but it's one of those things like Mikey was talking about when we looked at Brighton. Top 6, hopeful. I mean, they are going to give it a good go. Will they finish top 6, though? I'm not too
Tough
sure.
schedule, right?
They have, I think, what we presume to be the worst schedule left. They still have to play Liverpool. City is their last game. United, Arsenal, Spurs. We're also in. It's just like every big team you could think of, it's up there. So I'm not sure, but I mean, it's been a great story, and I think top 10 finish is still fantastic for them.
Yeah, it's amazing. Can they retain Thomas Frank? That's my big question. I know they re-signed him to a deal after the rumours about him moving. Do you think they can retain him? I mean, he seems very happy there. He fits that club and that philosophy really well. But, I mean, at some point, if a big club comes calling,
Yeah,
you know what happens, right?
It might also depend on where they finish this season too, right? If they somehow get into Europe, you're going to want to keep Thomas Frank. And I don't see him leaving. Back to the Everton comparison. It could happen, but credit to Everton because that stretch of them finishing outside the top 4 lasted for a very long time. They were the best of the rest for a long time. And if Brentford can get to that point, that's a very successful Premier League team.
It's called the Everton Cup.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
We finished just
That's
outside
right.
the Champions League spots. Yeah, I mean, listen, Everton, we mentioned Burnley playing champagne football, not Sean Dyche football. Well, now Everton is playing Sean Dyche football. Long balls, diagonals, they're pretty physical. They are harder to beat, that's for sure, under Sean Dyche. But do you think it'll be enough when push comes to shove?
I'm waiting for that point where Everton kind of takes off. Obviously, they've invested so much in their roster, and I'd go as far as saying is the amount that they've invested in the roster, they've gotten the least out of it in terms of $1 per point, whatever the ratio you want to, whatever math you want to do there. But is it enough? It's so tough. I want to believe in this Everton, but I can't. Every week they give me another reason to doubt them. I think they might be going down.
They're not going to be a team that's just going to kick off and start winning a bunch of games, I don't think. I think under Sean Dyche and the position that they're in right now with the players that they have right now, not really investing in January, they're going to have to scrape every single point in this Premier League to stay up. I truly believe that they will under Dyche, but I mean, it's a big undertaking. But there's so many teams that can go down. I think, man, Everton and Goodison Park, I know it hasn't been great, but I think that's what's going to keep them up.
Yeah, entering the weekend, 18th, that's in the drop zone, right? Mentioned there before. 22 points, 14 goals scored.
That's a big problem.
14 goals scored, that's just not good enough, right? So many issues there.
This is why you don't buy Neil Maupay.
Yeah, that's worked out so well, has it? Think of some of the great strikers they've had over the years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a real shame. I have them to win and over 2.5 goals in this game, though, actually. Brentford have, unbeaten in 12. At some point, they've got to lose, right?
You would think
At some
so.
point. I mean, they're a good team, but they're not a team that goes on these ridiculous runs.
Yeah.
They haven't shown that so far.
Knowing their schedule, wouldn't they think, okay, we got
We've
to
gotta
get
get this one.
points
That's a good
here
point.
because I don't know if I can, do it at Old Trafford against United.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know. I think pressure's going to be on.
I'm looking forward to the Ivan Toney and Tarkowski matchup. Ivan Toney's a guy who wins a ton of headers. I think he leads the league in flick-ons, whereas Tarkowski is so dominant in the air. That's going to be a matchup to watch.
Want to see a penalty?
I do. I love Ivan Toney penalties.
There's no one more fun to watch in the sport. Maybe no one better than Ivan Toney as well. And I tell you what, they better bank on him when they can, because there is a ban coming at some point, it seems, with the charges against him for the betting issues earlier in his career. 6 months they're talking about. Bad news of Brentford.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't come during the run-in for Brentford because with those fixtures you just mentioned, they're doomed without him. I mean, they've proven that they can win without him because they have with Mbeumo and Johan Visa. Those guys can score goals, but I mean,
For a short time.
when we talk
consistent.
about, I think when we talk about Ivan Toney, you have to talk about him with the likes of the Harry Kanes in the Premier League. That's how good
This
he's
year.
been.
I think
year
that's
and
really
last
good.
year,
Yeah,
this year and
I
last
think so.
year,
He's not just one of these strikers that does well near the bottom and mid-table league. He is a top-tier striker.
Well, maybe
he's
when
quality.
Kane goes to United, they can buy Tony. Spurs can buy
I'd love
Tony, right?
I wouldn't love Kane going to
Rubbing it in
United. but It's going to happen.
West Ham up against Aston Villa. West Ham and David Moyes, so much pressure, of course, for them right now. It has been a season from hell. They are sitting 16th in the table, 23 points. Villa, they're okay. They're playing better under Unai Emery, 11th over on 34 points. But let's talk about David Moyes. Is he on the hottest of hot seats in the Premier
How
League?
hot has that seat
It's
been?
like, you can't sit in there for more than a couple of seconds, I wouldn't think. before you
No.
start burning some cheeks.
4-0 to Brighton. I know we're just talking about how good Brighton have been, but that can't happen.
Yeah.
25 or 23 points for West Ham in this position with that team that he's assembled. They've spent money. There's really
spent
good
money.
players on that team.
Yeah.
It's just not some okey doke Premier League club. I don't know how he still has his job. I really don't. Will he get sacked before the end of the season? I don't think so. I think he can still do enough to keep them up. But I think at the end of the season, if they stay up, which I believe that they will, he's gone.
Well, especially with the way West Ham started their season last season, looking so promising, looking like a potential European contention spot.
They made
And
it to the semis, right? Europa League.
yeah,
Great
as
run.
well. They were really solid and they were giving, a lot of the big teams a run for their money. And then all of a sudden this season, relatively similar squad and just shambles. It's strange.
There's issues in the room there, I think, as well. Mikel Antonio doesn't seem happy at all.
No.
He wanted to move in January.
Yeah.
Didn't come. And when you hear about those rumblings, there's problems there, I think, and you're seeing it
Scamacca
reflected
too.
on the pitch.
Yeah, Scamacca wants to leave as well, which
Yeah.
that's why Antonio's upset because he's not getting playing time.
I know we were just talking about Brentford being the new Everton. I think they're closer to being the new West Ham. Because West Ham was that club that was just like slightly behind Everton. I think that's sort of the tier that Brentford is falling in right now.
Which would be fine. If you tell the average
fine,
Brentford fan
yeah.
you're going to be the new West Ham, they'll
Amazing.
say, are you kidding me? Absolutely. This team was in like the 4th tier of football not that long ago, right? They were on the verge of bankruptcy. They were bought by who? The .com guy.
The .com billionaire.
You got to watch these. You have to make sense of these inside jokes. You have to watch it. Deep dive
No,
on Brentford.
Went
today.
right over my head.
You didn't watch the show on Wednesday?
Oh yeah, I did.
No, you didn't.
I think I missed that part by accident.
It's nice research, isn't
I
it,
was
by
cooking
Albert
while I
there?
was watching it.
We were just talking about a bogey teams, and Aston Villa's bogey team, I think, is West Ham. If you look at the stats here, they've only won one of their last 5 Premier League games against West Ham. And I think that does mean something heading into a fixture like this, because Aston Villa have been much better under Unai Emery, but they're still susceptible to not being a convincing team week in, week out. And this is a spot where I think they might slip up
Does Danny Ings score?
against his former team. I mean, how many former teams has Danny Ings had,
Yeah.
to be fair?
He just loves the colour scheme, right? He played for Burnley as well.
Yes, that's right. He's done
Claret
the
and
3.
blue. Yeah,
I love
that's
that.
good. Bring out his eyes, I think, the colour. Really, really good. What do you make of Villa over as a club? I mean, I'm curious, people that live over in Canada, do you see Villa as a big club, or what kind of level do you see them at?
See, the past couple of years, that's deteriorated a little bit. I think they are a big club when you understand what it means to be at their stadium, when you understand their fans, the backing, the support that they get. But results-wise, that hasn't lived up to that expectation. So are they a big club? Big-ish. I think if I were going to rank that, I'd probably rank them between like 12 and 15 in the Premier League. That's my perception of it because of the last recent years.
Yeah, I mean, when Villa were at the peak of their powers, the coverage wasn't here in Canada. We didn't get to see them, right? But just recently, being past 20 years or whatever the case may be, Villa haven't been at the top, right? So I think the perception here is that they're a Premier League club, an important English club, but in terms of a big club, I think fans here would look at the Manchester City,
absolutely.
Arsenals.
They're a
instead.
Premier League club, but they're not on the level of, the big 6.
No, they haven't been that way for a long time. In the 80s, they were fantastic, but they are a
Massive
well-supported
club.
club.
Like kind of on Crystal Palace level.
Yeah.
That's what I'd.
Oh, they're bigger than
way-
Palace.
Bigger.
But that's
No,
that's
that's
what
my
my
perception.
perception is.
Yeah.
No, I know.
I
The
know
Villa
exactly what you
faithful here in Toronto will be upset by that, but I get what you're saying. But yeah, they're a legitimately big club, but the game's changed so much now. It's about how much money you have, and the super clubs are just in a different stratosphere entirely. Even West Ham's a big club as well, right? And a very, very community-based club as well, but not perhaps respected over here like they should be. Anyway, time for another break. That's all the games we got to. I did get a couple of bets, though, I think, during the show so far. That's why we have a third block to correct my numerous mistakes. All right, so we'll see you then. Welcome back to Soccer Today. It is the 5th block, not the 3rd block. We use this block to correct my mistakes
All right.
and your mistakes. You made none today, though. I got a few mistakes, including calling it the 3rd block. But it's the 5th block. Also, I missed a Chelsea bet. I have Chelsea beating Leicester and under 0.5 goals for Leicester. So basically, Chelsea win to 0. And I think that's pretty good at plus 210. I don't see Leicester finding a way. They've not convinced me at all this season. I think Brendan Rodgers will be a new club next year. They've got no money whatsoever. They were hammered by the pandemic. The money for Leicester, the ownership, comes from duty-free stores in airports, which didn't do too well the last 3 years or so. So that's reflected now on the club. So yeah, Chelsea back-to-back wins, looking pretty good, I think. Sarah, your bet?
Yeah, Brighton and Leeds. I want to back Brighton, but there's something just about Leeds being in relegation territory and it's at home that I think they're going to fight tooth and nail for this one. So I was thinking, okay, maybe go Brighton, go both teams to score, but I'm staying away from the winner again and going for another goal scorer in Matoma. 3 goals last 5 matches. We've given him so much love. I don't think we need to give him any more. We know what he's capable of, but there's something about this game that just hasn't sold me quite on Brighton because of how much pressure Leeds are going to be under.
Yeah, desperate clubs, right?
Desperate.
Just at Ellen Road, right?
It is. That's a great ground, just volatile, and they want that team to do well. Mikey?
Yeah, so what am I?
West Ham.
West Ham Villa.
What am I? West Ham.
That's a very good question. What is my team? That could be a long conversation, couldn't it?
So West Ham Villa. So actually, I did make a mistake, and I said that Villa won one of the last 5 games against West Ham. That's not true. They're winless in their last 9 games against West Ham, which is why I'm taking the Hammers in this spot at plus 123 at home.
You're
So,
a brave man.
winless in their last 9. Does that not mean anything?
Plus
It
money is
means
nice at
it's
home,
a
too.
lot. There's a
Plus-
lot of broken clubs right now
I know.
in that league. So out of these matches, what's the biggest storyline do you think this weekend? Is it Chelsea? Is it United coming off 7-0? What is it?
Arsenal City,
Arsenal.
right?
Yeah, I think it's at the
title
top.
race.
It's still that battle?
Yeah. Yeah. Arsenal Fulham, though, I think maybe match of the weekend. A little
That's the
London
early game on
derby.
Sunday.
Yeah, that's a
too.
really good one.
No, you know what? No João Paulinho. I don't trust
That's a
Fulham.
tough one.
I don't
Yeah.
trust Fulham without him. Arsenal's going to win that game.
And also, Man City, they don't play the following weekend because they have FA Cup. So Arsenal could actually win 2 games if City don't pick up a
Right.
victory
Interesting.
and make their
It's
league
that-
double digits.
It's that weird time, isn't it, with the FA
Yeah.
Cup breaking up and all these. I mean, like I said, Brighton with 3 games in hand is kind of crazy this time of year, right? But it's the reality. Anyway, great games this weekend, great storylines, great narratives. We're back same time next week. Enjoy the matches and cheers for watching.